This is the old Adams Mill Bridge in Carroll County. They redid this about 20 years ago, and redid this about 20 years ago, fixed it all back up. It used to be closed down to traffic, and the road on the other side was closed, dead end, and they just let it overgrow. But since they refurbished it and redid it all, it's nice, really nice. They redid the supports. See, this is all new here compared to the old. Well, built like an old barn. A lot of wasp nests up there. Get this fellow's way. But it's nice. North Fork of the Wildcat Creek passes underneath. If you like catfish, fishing for catfish, this is the place to go. It's nice. But they fixed her up, replaced a lot of beams that needed work, redid boards on the outside, and paint, of course. This is just a neat old bridge. And the decking, they replaced all it. It looks like this. Replaced one here just recently, but it's nice. Nice to see things like this survive. Walk down to the window here. I don't think anybody will hit me. Everybody's got their name carved. There's public access if you want to come down here and fish. Neat old historic bridge. Built about 1874, 1876, I believe. Really nice. And this is Adams Mill. This mill building here was built in 1845. And a fellow named John Adams built it. And they say he was related somehow or another to the second president, John Adams. There's some historical signs over there that tell about the lodge here and about the mill itself. The town originally was called Boulevard. I think that lasted about 4 or 5 years, and they started calling the town Wildcat because the Wildcat Creek flows near here. There is a dam over there on the east side that has been destroyed, so that there's no water built up anymore to run the sluice or anything like that. But when the dam was there was a sluice gate over there that they could open or close, and the water would flow over to here under the road to the mill, under the mill, and then return back to the creek on the other side, because the creek just does a big donut, comes back up to itself, which is kind of a shame. When I was a little boy, they still operated this occasionally for just the cornmeal. And I can remember my mom bringing me and my brothers over here, and like 2 days a week the guy would run it and grind corn to sell. She'd always get a bag of cornmeal for her and some for the neighbors and deliver it, and they took turns doing it. But this is the big drive assembly that sit down in there, and it's so dark in there you can't hardly see anything, but it was not an upright wheel. The wheel set flat, and as the water hit it, it spun it. It's called a turbine wheel. And the shaft going up had a planetary gear like that one, and that one meshed with it and turned this shaft here, which had numerous belts and chains and everything else on it. That was how it worked. Looks like a smaller version of the turbine wheel. But the corn was all ground on the first floor. There were elevators that took the grain from the front there up to bins in the top that held it, and it all was fed down by gravity. The flour rollers, they called them, that ground the flour, were on the second floor. There was like 3 or 4 of those that ground the wheat, and below it on the first floor, the man would stand there with a chute and the scales and the bags, and the flour would fall down into the bags, and when he'd weigh it and then take it and sew it up with a little sewing machine like thing that they had. Neat to watch. But they did barley and wheat up there. They did corn down here. And this is where they would put the grain, and the grain would go down a chute into a grain leg kind of deal, a belt with cups that would carry it up to the top and dump it into the bin, whether it be the corn or the wheat. People would back their trucks up to here, scoop it off, or bring it in bags or wagons or whatever they could bring it in. They'd make an appointment and bring it when, like going to the getting your pet at the vet. Make an appointment. When your time is, you show up, and if it took 2 hours to do your wagon load, that's how long you had. Really nice old place though. They closed it in the 50s because here it says turbine wheel. It's not from this one. From a mill over in Burlington, which is to the east. But the water would catch on these and push, and you could just hear how much of a deflection you wanted on it. And by turning this, you turn that, which moved this, which made it more or less. And they actually spun pretty fast. But they had to be serviced quite often because sitting in the water, you can imagine that they, the moisture and everything was hard on them. Try to get down here without breaking my neck. Sit on a lot of piers. And like I said, when I was a little boy, we'd come over here. I'd have to come down here and watch the water come shooting out of here. And I mean, it did shoot out of here. Frogs I'm bothering. Probably some minnows too. Not looking too healthy now. But the water would come out of there. And it was kind of compressed. Here's the big old chute I told you about from the front. Grain would slide down this. Here's where the grain leg is still. There's a big belt with cups on it that would pick it up and carry it up and return down this way empty and go back up. And the mill wheel turned the belts that powered it. It was a lot of labor, but at the same time it saved doing everything by hand. Yeah. There's the shaft that went up to the gears. It's even got a sprinkler system in it now. May have been something they added recently. I think this was where all the husks, or maybe it was so they could service the belt. Could be. I'm not really going to mess with it. That's not mine to horse around with. Yeah, there is a belt in there, so that's probably where they just serviced it. Looks like they worked on it recently. A lot of old antiques here. You can rent cabins and spend the weekend. Like I said, this flows back over to the Wildcat, which goes under the bridge. The bridge is over there, Adams Mill Bridge. And the water flows back into the same creek, not wasted. And this thing is 4 stories. And I'm telling you, when it closed down, the health service closed it down because they came up with an idea you can't grind flour or anything consumed by humans if it might have anything to do with mice or, you know, bugs, anything like that, and they couldn't guarantee it, so they had to close. Which was a shame because almost immediately the boards on the side were falling off, and I mean, it looked like one of those barns you would see out in the country that no one's taken care of, neglected, and it's really starting to show it. And I really thought she wasn't going to last, but a fella bought it and tried to preserve it, and he couldn't handle it all, so he sold it to somebody else, and they worked on it, and they ended up selling it, and then ended up being donated to a preservation society, and here it sits today, which is a good deal. If y'all want to spend a nice afternoon, you know, it's open on weekends, I believe. Come visit. Where I'm at now is a little town in southern Carroll County. It's called Lexington, or Lex. And very, very old village. It actually was a part of an old freight trail that went from Burlington to Rossville. This was a stopover on the freight trail, and it's about 10 miles from Burlington. You go about another 10 miles, you come to a little place that's not even there anymore called Prince William. And then once you go past that, it's about 10 miles to Rossville. That ex-lady. Okay, here we go again. But anyhow, about 10 miles from Prince William to Rossville. So it was about a 25-30 mile trip, and it was horse and wagons hauling freight. It was a stagecoach line that ran. You know, of course, people just on horseback would ride it. There were, in the 1820s, up until about the Civil War, there were really no set roads in the state that the state had made. People would use Indian trails or kind of just a berm of a high ground here, ridge, and they would just travel that. That was the easiest way to get from place to place, and it was overland. It was not a road. It was just ruts and mud, and you know, it was unkept. And Lexington got to be a place where when you would get here, your team would be wore out, and if you were individual teamster, you'd rest your horses, you'd get something to eat, it had all the amenities you'd need. If you need your wagon fixed, there was a person here, blacksmith. There was an inn here for the travelers. There's a large church here, Presbyterian church in Lexington. And it was just a road stop. And there was also a trail that went from Delphi to Frankfort that crossed here. It went northwest to southeast, whereas the Burlington to Rossville went kind of northeast to southwest. So they both met just about right here at Lexington. So Lexington got quite a bit of business. And right now it's about 6 houses. And it just sits back there amongst the trees. But in its day, it was about as big as Sedalia. It was several businesses. Wherever there were people who needed things, that's where people built their businesses. Just an interesting little place. It's off the road, and they don't even have a sign up for the town anymore. But I can remember when I was a young man, this was Lexington. This was Lex, we used to call it. And the church isn't there anymore. It used to be a big old building there that you used for a Legion Hall and a church, but it's gone, I saw. But I haven't been here in about 5-6 years, and things just change. But I'm going to move on and cover some more stops on the trail and try to make it more complete. This little town is called Geetingsville, and about the size of Kilmore. You blink, you missed it, and you're driving through. There's an old salvage yard here today. It was quite a bustling town in the old days. Had a tannery here, large Presbyterian church. In fact, when they built this church about 1890s or so, the one at Lexington kind of fell by the wayside. This one kind of became the main Presbyterian church. There was about altogether, I don't know, 10 houses. There was a telephone company, one of the smallest in Indiana, but there was a cemetery here. Really, that's just about it. This is just one of the places where I grew up. My dad farmed a lot around here, and being around here to bring back a lot of memories. But neat old stuff. Nice little towns, quiet little towns. Except here on 26, there's a lot of traffic, but you live with that. Hope you can hear me in the wind, but this area right here was where the town of Prince William was. And it was the second stop, or one of the stops on the Rossville to Burlington freight route. And as you see, there's nothing but countryside now, but at one time it was about the size of Lex. Had horses there, had blacksmith, had all the businesses that you needed. And like I said, this was the stop on the freight route. On up this road was another town called, looks like it's spelled like Xenia, but it's pronounced Zany. And on beyond it was a town called G-Town, G-E-E town. A fellow named G lived there, and he kind of did what Prince William and Lexington did. He just serviced the freight wagons and things. But we'll head on up to the Zany Bridge up by G-Town. Now this is what they call the Zany Bridge, and have no idea when it was built or put up. There's no nothing on it, steelwork or anything that says that. But this is a pretty old bridge. The deck has been replaced with concrete, but this creek was the north fork of the Wildcat Creek, and this is part of the trail from the new Lancaster that went over to Adams Mill, I believe. Can't remember right now. Went this route, and I imagine they had some type of either forged the creek or had another bridge here to do. Farther up the creek and on the other side was a place called G-Town. And about 2 miles back down the road was Zany, a little burg that was junction between a couple of the freight trails. And farther on with that was Prince William. And like I said, this is just a neat old bridge. Pretty old, really old. Where I'm at now is called the Lancaster Bridge. It's near a town called Lascaux. And it's just barely still in Carroll County, not by much. Right at the very south edge of Carroll County. And this bridge, if I remember right, was built about the same time the old Adams Mill Bridge was built, in the 1870s. This one never fell into disrepair. It's always been open to traffic, at least as long as I can remember. It goes over the north fork of the Wildcat Creek, just like the Zany Bridge and the old Adams Mill Bridge does. Of course, the Wildcat's a little wider here, a little deeper too. Looks like they've done some reinforcement underneath of it. Put some steel work under the wood. But as far as I can always remember, this bridge was always open to traffic. None of these covered bridges will carry much weight. They never did. They were meant for horse and buggy. But this has the same, a little bit different technique. It doesn't have the really bowed up arch type of supports, just a crisscross. Hornets up there don't like me being around. And this doesn't have a window in the middle, I don't believe. This is a neat old bridge. I like this type of deck better than the one at the other Adams Mill Bridge. And you can tell the roof has been relatively new. They replaced this sometime recent. This is newer lumber. But the structure itself is pretty original. Probably seen it's see if I can zoom in on this, something about JR February 12th, 1915. Kokomo, Indiana. Shelter. $1107.50. Bell. That's kind of interesting. Kind of an ornate design. See if I see any more of those. Every so often they take these bridges apart, go to working on them. Yeah, this is built exactly the same year as the old Adams Mill Bridge. Yeah. Yeah. Done a lot of work on her. It's not quite as fancy as the other one at Adams Mill, but these are nice old bridges. I'm glad they're still around. Hope you can hear me in the wind. This is the little town of Lascaux. Not very large at all. About a dozen houses. And originally I believe it was the one called New Lancaster, back in the freight days. And one of the freight trails started here and went to Adams Mill. And so if you see on the map New Lancaster, I believe they're in reference to this. And the bridge, old covered bridge, is called the Lancaster Bridge. So I believe that's merit to that.